Hi there, Lindsay here, the Frugal Crafter. Today I'm going to show you how I made this baby keepsake box with a Harry Potter theme. A friend of mine wanted to give a gift to her great-grandniece, and she wanted to have something that the baby could keep their keepsakes in, or I should say the parents can keep the baby's keepsakes in, such as, baby welcome greeting cards and first lock of hair, all those things that you would eventually scrapbook. But it's nice to have a place for them to go until then. So she picked up an unfinished wooden box from the craft store and asked me if I would decorate it in a Harry Potter theme. And this was fun because it gave me a chance to use up a lot of the mixed media and scrapbooking supplies that I have had gathering dust in my drawers. So I started off with just some plain black acrylic paint, and I'm going to go in and paint the raw edge of the inside of the box. And I'm doing this first because I know I'm going to do some painting and collaging on the outside. I'm going to do some decoupaging on the inside. So by painting this first, if I smudge at all, it will get covered up by the next layer. So that's why I'm starting with the inside of the box. After the inside was done, I began working on the outside, and I'm using some brown acrylic paint. Now, originally I was just going to paint the box brown, but then I realized that a stained look would look nice too. I think it just is up to you. Do you prefer a more solid look? Do you prefer a stained look? Do you want to do a faux finish on it? Really, you can do anything. If I decided I wanted this to look like a wooden trunk, but if you wanted it to look like a leather suitcase, you could definitely paint it more opaquely and then maybe like tap on a texture with a plastic bag, or you could do any sort of faux finishing you wanted to it. I find just using a wet rag or damp baby wipe, as long as it's not too linty, can wipe away the excess paint, so you're just left with a subtle staining on the box. And I think that looked really nice. It brings in some extra texture, and when you have like an overall background texture like that, I feel like it's a little interesting and you don't have to cover every single bit up. So again, it's up to you. I think if you did a faux finish, that would also give you a really nice, interesting background to work on. But I didn't want to be over the top with the collaging on this. I didn't know, how extra my friend would want it. So I figured I'd kind of go a little bit more moderate. I decided that it would be a lot easier to do my painting and collaging if I took off the hardware here. The latches, the other latches weren't so easy to take off, so I left them on, but this like kind of handle in the front I really wanted to remove. Just be careful because those have really teeny tiny little screws. You'll want to put them someplace safe so you don't lose them before you're done your project. And I got to tell you, putting those little screws back in was very it was very difficult. I kept dropping them, and very hard to find little screws that go rolling around on your paint-stained studio carpet. I'm doing a little bit of distressing here on the edges with a rag and a little bit of black paint. You could also use a paintbrush to distress if you want. I'm not sure if I actually like that or if I liked it better before, so, proceed with caution. I guess it looks all right. I wanted it to look kind of like older, so that's why I did the distressing, but I was kind of like, oh, was that a mistake when I was doing it? But in hindsight, I actually like it. So now I'm using some matte medium, and I'm going to collage some book pages on the inside of this. Now, before you get upset thinking, oh my word, you ruined a book for this, it was an old Reader's Digest book that was going to be thrown away from our local library book sale, so I rescued it. So what I did was I cut the paper to width for the sides of the bottom of the box and the lid of the box, and then I also trimmed the book paper so I had flat edges, so I kind of trimmed it flush up with the text of the page, and then I tore on the other edges so that except for these areas where I'm going right up against the edge of the box and I want it straight, I wanted the edges torn because the torn edge will it'll decoupage down flat, so you won't get like little edges lifting up. So there's a little tip for you there. You can use the back of a paintbrush, a palette knife, or a credit card to really push that paper into the corners. You want to make sure you're getting the paper right up against the surface. So my rule of thumb is put a layer of glue on the surface, a layer of glue on the back of the paper you're trying to glue down, and then brush over a layer of glue. And that seems to really give you that good bond. It pushes out the air bubbles and just makes sure that nothing is going to be lifting or wrinkling as it dries. So you do want to be pretty fastidious with this step, and I know it can be a little time consuming, but I think it's worth it. Now here you can see I've got the flat edge that I'm butting up against the edge of the box, and then you can see the torn edge that is the other three edges. That way, when I decoupage over that, those torn fibers, the paper gets thinner at the edge when you have it torn, so it tapers in to your other pages, and it just gives you a really nice flat surface. It's unlikely to lift. And then you're just going to repeat the same process on the lid until everything's done. And then just, make sure it has a good coat of Mod Podge when you're done. I like the matte Mod Podge because it's less likely to get sticky over time, especially if you live in a humid area, and then you don't have a lot of glare to deal with. So that would be my pick if you're trying to decide which Mod Podge to go with, because there's like a dozen different Mod Podge finishes out there. I'm using a pastel pencil. This happens to be a Derwent pastel pencil in white. You could also use a piece of white chalk. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you sew, you probably have a white chalk pencil in your stash you can use. And I'm sketching on an owl. So I went to Unsplash and I looked at a bunch of different owl reference photos, and I really wanted to fit the owl on the box, but I felt like it would be a little more interesting if the owl was in flight. First I was thinking an owl in flight and it would be holding the Hogwarts acceptance letter, but then I realized I wanted to do a wax seal on the acceptance letter so it would look extra dark academia and also very Harry Potterish, so I needed to have the envelope larger. And if I had it to scale, if it was holding it, then the owl wouldn't fit. So I decided to have the owl kind of like it had been carrying it in his beak and just dropped it, because you know how the owls would just drop the letters and they would like find their way into the houses they needed to go to. So I decided to have my owl further back in the sky in mid-flight and with a wand in his talons. So I found a flying owl that was just in the right, kind of in the right gesture on Unsplash, but it wasn't the right type of owl. So basically I just sketched the owl from Unsplash, and then I ended up painting it white and shades of gray so it would look a little bit more like a snowy owl, because Hedwig, Harry Potter's owl, was a snowy owl. So yeah, I'm getting a little nerdy here, but I wanted it to be as accurate as I could, but I don't really have any Harry Potter crafting products except for the wax seals, which are so fun and so awesome, and I really need to use them more. And I did use like several of them on this box because they're just so cool. So take your time when you're sketching here. Don't worry about making a mistake, because if you do make a mistake, you can take a wet Q-tip and wipe off the chalk. That's why I'm suggesting you draw with chalk or pastel or chalk pencil, because after you paint it, even if you have some stray lines, like sometimes when you're painting, you're like, oh, that line's not right, and so you don't bring your paint all the way out to that line. You just wipe it away with a wet Q-tip and all is right in the world. So, so that would be my advice there. And take your time on the drawing, because we are working on that stained background, you don't want to make a big mistake that you have to paint over, because you're not going to be able to paint over transparently. You're going to have to try to remove that paint, and it's just a little bit more of an ordeal to do it that way. So once I felt like my drawing was pretty secure, I got some paint and I went and just filled in everything with some white paint. And the white paint I recommend, obviously use whatever you have, but if you do want a nice opaque white paint for doing projects like this, my favorite is the Chromacryl Block Out White, and it's very affordable. I think it's a 16-ounce bottle of it from Blick. I think it's around $10, and it lasts so well, and it is such a heavily pigmented titanium white paint, and it's a flow. It's kind of, I wouldn't say it's fluid, but it's kind of the texture of maybe like a soft body acrylic paint. It is the most opaque paint I've ever used, and it's a student grade paint, which is crazy, but it's white. I don't have to worry about it fading, so I don't care that it's student grade. It works and it does the job. And now I added a little bit of black in to make some gray, and I'm just kind of doing some shading on the owl, and I am using the original Unsplash reference photo for the shading, and yeah, I'm just kind of trying to make some texture. I know it looks really sloppy right now, but I know as long as I've got my borders and I know where the borders are going to be, I feel like I can keep playing around until I get it just the way I want it. I'm not a huge wildlife painter that's painting animals. It used to be when I was a kid. I loved painting animals, but as I've gotten older, I'm definitely more interested in like still lifes and food illustration. But yeah, it's kind of fun. It was fun to paint an animal. I always feel like my animals look a little bit goofy. I don't know why, but I think this is going to work out for this this box just fine. And of course, if you don't feel confident in your ability to paint, but you want to do something like this, then you could find some clip art online. You could find a photo and print it out. You could like get a collage book or buy some stickers or scrapbooking paper and just like cut and paste, and that would look good too. So if you don't feel like painting, you find a different way to get the results you want. You could definitely find enough vintage papers and stickers and things like that to collage a box, and in any theme that you wanted to do for somebody. So don't let any perceived lack of ability dissuade you from making a keepsake box. And it's not even that a keepsake box has to be for a baby. A keepsake box could be for a bride or a groom, or somebody going off to college. Anytime you're going to be having some sort of milestone in your life, a keepsake box is a wonderful gift, because we always get these little mementos that you don't really have a place for. We don't want them to clutter things up, but we don't want to get rid of them either. So things like if you're giving one to a college student, they might keep their graduation program. They might keep invitations to different events they've gone to, ticket stubs. Maybe people don't keep that sort of stuff anymore. I guess most of that's digital, but programs to concerts, so that sort of thing. Things like that are just wonderful to have in a box like this. It's tidy, it's out of the way, the box is attractive, and then when you're feeling nostalgic, you can, sift through your friends' photos and all that good stuff that it's fun to have. So think about that for any sort of, life event. I'm adding in a little bit of yellow, ochre, and brown, just kind of tapping it on with my paintbrushes here. You could sponge it on. Sponging it on would work really well. If you want to use sponging, then I would tape off the excess, because it's going to be really hard to control where your sponging goes, and you don't want to have just texture in the middle. You'd want to go right out to the edges. So I'm doing it with a brush because I'm too lazy to tape, and I figured I can control it pretty well. I just want that little bit of a parchment texture here, and I think it worked out pretty well. I didn't want it too bright white. Now I'm using the chisel edge of the brush and a little bit of brown just to kind of get the envelope flap there. And I think it looks like an envelope. I'm pretty happy with that. And did a little bit of highlighting on the wand while I was at it, since I had that light color on my brush. And I'm also defining the edges because they got a little bit sloppy when I was tapping the colors in there. So it's not done until you say it's done. If you're not happy with it, then it's not done yet. So keep on working. And if you are doing a painted scene like this and you decide, oh, this is awful, I don't like it, well, then you could paint over it and you could do a solid background color and do a full finish on it or something. Don't get too upset if it's not turning out just the way you want it. Especially when you're using acrylic paints that are a nice, like, kind of soft body consistency. You're not going to have a bunch of ridges. You shouldn't have a bunch of ridges anyway. You should be able to go over that if you need to. Or you could even sand it down if you weren't happy with it. Like, I'm not in love with the way the owl's looking now, but I'm like, well, I got to just keep building up some layers, building up some texture, and it will get there. So, that's another reason I wanted to leave this step in. Even though I did speed it up, I wanted you to see, that we all struggle and it looks bad before it gets good. Remember the hot mess stage. I always talk about hitting the hot mess stage when we are working on a project and things are looking like, oh, how are we going to save this? But we get there. We get there. A lot of times it's just kind of softening any harsh transitions and getting it to look a little bit smoother or a little bit more finished. Now, I did use a paint pen there to outline my envelope, and I will be going back in with paint pens a little bit more because they're kind of really nice for adding in little details on small paintings like this. The box is probably, I don't know, I would say maybe 12 by 16. I didn't measure it. I'm not really confident with my hand lettering ability, but I did want to have the Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry on the envelope. And so I just went online, I looked up what a Hogwarts acceptance letter would look like, and then I just copied that font just by hand using a paint pen. This is the acrylic paint pens from Ohuhu. They are dual-ended, and the fine tip end is actually pretty fine tip, so I was able to do that lettering, and that worked out really well. And then I'm using another color, I think this is the gray, just to add a little bit of subtle texture into the owls and just kind of make it look a little bit more polished, I guess. So even if you have like a skill that you're not really that happy with, for me it's hand lettering. It always is, but I didn't want to print something off on my inkjet printer because if I decoupaged it on, the ink would run. So I was kind of like, well, I really either have to find a stamp that will look good, but I knew they would be too big, or I've got to do it by hand and just do my best. And I find that drawing doesn't intimidate me, but writing does. So what I do is I just find something to copy, just like I would if I was looking at something to draw. I look at the letters and draw them as good as I can. And I think it looks all right because it does look like something that was maybe written with a quill, like a feather quill pen. It's a little bit imprecise and kind of like gothic looking. And I think that works for the vibe of this piece. So don't be hard on yourself, do your best, and I'm sure anyone who receives this would love it. And of course, the person you're receiving it, if they're more minimal, you might want to do some things a little bit more minimal. If there's somebody who's maximal, that's very, eclectic, you can go crazy with the design, which is kind of fun. It's fun. Something you might want to consider too when you're doing a box like this is the things that you glue on it, you want to make sure they're really secure. And also, if it's a box like this and somebody is like tight for space, you want to make sure it can be stacked. So just be careful about stuff on the bottom or on the lid of the box. Like, you might not want to put feet on the box if you know it's going to be stacked in a closet. You might not want to put too many embellishments on the top if you know it's going to be stacked, just to keep it from, those things from breaking off in the future. I like the idea of the owl flying with a wand and the wand kind of like casting magical dust and, happy magical spells behind it. So I had stenciled on some random stars, a scattering of stars, and now I'm using a gold pen just to kind of draw some swirly lines coming from the wand, just to make sure it looks like the wand is casting a spell. The star stencil I used, I'm not sure exactly where it's from. I think it might be from Oriental Trading Company and like a big batch of stencils that I bought. But I have several star stencils with different sizes of stars on them, so I'm sure you can find them. Just kind of Google star stencil or look through your stash first, because if you're like me, I'm like, I need a star stencil, and I found like 4 that were gonna work for this. So just look in what you have first before you go ordering, because probably if you've been a crafter for any amount of time, if you've done scrapbooking and card making, you probably have a really good selection of products to choose from. That's that star stencil that I showed you. Actually, you know what? I think that might have been Stampin' Up. But either way, I have several star stencils. And the great thing about stencils is that they are reusable. You buy them once and use them forever. I find that the stencils that have more of like an organic pattern like this, or just kind of basic patterns, are the ones I use the most. So if you are new to stenciling, rather than buying ones that are very specific, try getting simple things like swirls and stars and polka dots and stripes and maybe like a damask. Patterns like that, quatrefoil, scales, scallops, those sort of things are things that you can use over and over again, and they don't look dated because they're not like a trendy pattern, for instance. They're a little bit more normal, I guess. They're more timeless. Now, if you do make any mistakes in your stenciling, take a wet Q-tip and then just kind of erase it. And that's what I'm doing in here, just a little water on that Q-tip. And because I had to layer up my stencils, I had some smudging, and yeah, that fixes it pretty well. Now, I did start to do some collaging on here before I remembered that I was making a video, and so I showed you the front there. Now, if you have a box, you can collage things right over the division on the box. You'll just need to trim it. You'll just need to cut it later. I'll show you how to do that. But I have so much collage fodder and ephemera and stuff like that from my card making that I thought this is a great opportunity to pull these things out. I have some little sticker booklets. I've got these Tim Holtz, I think they're called paper dolls. I call them generic relatives or faux ancestors. I just think they're kind of fun. And I thought, this is for a little girl. I would love to have like a little girl clip art here, little girl paper doll. And then I thought, I have a stack of suitcase sticker. It's like a dimensional sticker that I've wanted to use on this project, and I think this would be just perfect if I could have her sitting on the stack of suitcases. So that's what we're going to do here. Now, when you are collaging, you want to avoid the sticker sneeze look, and that's when you just have a bunch of like random things glued down or stickers stuck down, but nothing seems cohesive. Now, to avoid that, you want to cluster your elements, and clustering means like kind of putting some things together, overlapping, making stuff kind of touch other pieces of collage ephemera. And when you do that, it just gives you kind of a cohesive look. It lets one thing trail to the other. So even though I've got like books of stickers and I've got packs of ephemera and I've got all these different things from different sources, they all will kind of go together because you have them touching each other, overlapping. Maybe you've added a little bit of paint to make the colors match a little bit. Whatever you're doing, when you overlap things and have things touch each other, it just brings that cohesiveness and that flow to your work. So if you struggle with collaging, that might be why. Now, if I'm just doing paper, I'm just going to use Mod Podge, which I keep Mod Podge right in that little squeeze bottle there. You can get those squeeze bottles from the Dollar Tree, and that's really, really handy. If I'm doing something that's thicker, I'll use my Beacon 3-in-1 adhesive. That's a very, it's almost like cold hot glue. It's so thick, it'll marry just about anything, but it's much more strong. So I don't have to worry about stuff peeling up or coming undone. But it's overkill for paper because I can't get it smooth enough and thin enough for paper. So for the paper, I'm going to use Mod Podge, but for cardstock or plastic or metal, I'm going to use the Beacon 3-in-1. If you live somewhere that has an Ocean State job lot, that glue is like, I think $2.50 a bottle there, so it's really good. I'll even put it under my stickers like I am here if I'm kind of feeling like that sticker might not want to hold long term. It's not a bad idea to put a few drops of glue under your stickers because, you know, who knows what kind of adhesive they're using on the stickers. That just gives you a little extra insurance policy with your ephemera. Now this was a resin charm I made a long time ago. It was from a mold that I bought. I actually bought it in Canada at Michael's up there. It was a, is it called Prima still, or it was one of the Finnabar molds through, I don't know if they called it Prima or if Prima was using one of their other names, but you know, it's from Prima or Iron Orchard or Art Philosophy, one of the brands they own. And I had cast a bunch of those and I hadn't used them all for a project, so I grabbed that out of my leftover bin. I always save my extra castings when I do resin or plaster or hot glue or anything like that, and I throw them in a tin, and then when I'm doing projects like this, I'll be shuffling through those tins looking for anything that might work. So those do come in handy. Yes, you end up with a lot of clutter in your drawers, just stuff that you've been hanging on to, but they do come in handy. These little stickers came from, I think it was like Scrapbook Pal or something. It was in kind of a big assortment that I got at one point, and I thought that would be great for layering over. It kind of has a little bit of a luggage tag postmark feel. And I thought that would be really good to layer over there. And actually, I just showed the picture of the finished box to my friend who ordered it, and she absolutely loved it. Her only suggestion was to have a luggage tag with, like, it's a gift from, with her name on it, just so that the baby will know who it came from when she's older. So I've got to add that somewhere on the box. But yeah, stickers are handy, but I do like to add a little bit of extra glue, and I do like to varnish over them just to make sure everything is going to be nice and secure. I really enjoy washi tape stickers, and the cat you can see here and also that postage stamp on the right are washi tape stickers. They kind of have this translucent paper that they're printed on, and they can pretty much disappear once you stick them down. At least the edges kind of fade into the background, and I think that looks really nice on these projects. Plus the paper's so thin that it really grabs and layers over other elements, so it's wonderful for a top layer of a project here. I used a hole punch to punch out the tag hole in that little tag there because it wasn't punched out to begin with. I feel like that looks a little bit nicer when you do that. And one thing I want to mention, when you do put your stickers down, when you're ready to varnish them, just run your fingers over the washi tape stickers to make sure if there are any wrinkles, because I think that it actually might have a little plastic in them or something. Sometimes it just gets a little weird when you put the varnish over it. Just run your fingers over it and spread out any bubbles that may occur. But generally, I find they work really well. Now I had a lot of kind of like clean area there that I wanted to mess up a little bit, so I'm going to use a kind of a postmark, cancellation postmark stamp, and just kind of stamp that down across a few of the pieces. That way it will look like maybe the steamer trunk had to go be shipped somewhere and it got stamped, and I thought that was kind of a fun look. Just make sure you use a waterproof ink. I'm using Ranger Archival. StazOn would also work, but just something that's going to it's going to be permanent once it's dry. Now you probably see some areas where it's a little bit shiny on the box. That's just where I had used some Mod Podge to decoupage some things down. Once I do the final varnish, everything will be evened out, and I'll be using a matte polyacrylic for my final varnish, which you'll see in a few moments. Now remember what I told you about the clustering, layering things up over other things just gives you a cohesive look. That's what I'm doing here. This is another one of those washi tape stickers, and it just kind of the edges become invisible and you can kind of see through it a little bit. And I just think those are really nice for layering, and as is this one. So it's kind of hard to tell. Sometimes you might not know that you have these in your stash, because when you look at the stickers, they look like regular stickers, but when you peel them off the background, they show up. You actually might think they're die cuts. I thought they were die cuts at first, the first time I used these, and I was gluing them down, and then one of them peeled up, and I was like, what? That's actually a sticker. So yeah, it pays to check your stash. I think they're kind of a newer thing, because I just came across them like last fall, I think were my first ones. Now to separate the stickers here, where you have the lid, just use a nice sharp craft knife. I just snapped off the blade so I'd have a nice sharp edge, and you want to cut right through. And I like to do it with the box shut. That way I know that I'm getting it just right on that cut. And sharp knife, guys, I cannot stress that. When you have a dull knife, you end up risking ruining your project and cutting yourself. When you have a nice sharp knife, you have less chance of injury. And there, it worked really, really well. So this is another one of my hot wax embellishments. This one says Owl Post, I believe, or this might be the Gryffindor one. So I have a hot wax brass stamp for all the Harry Potter houses, one that says Owl Post, one that says Hogwarts, and one that says Platform 9 3/4. So I absolutely adore them. It was funny because when I found them on Amazon, I bought a set for my sister for her birthday, and I'm like, why didn't I buy two? I really want one of these too. And you know, it's a good gift when it's something that you'd want to get yourself as well. And then my husband got me the wax seals for Christmas, so I ended up being able to get a set as well, which is really nice. I've also seen a Deathly Hallows one, which I don't have yet, which I might actually get because I'm a nerd. But so we're going to start varnishing now. The board I'm working on, it's just a couple pieces of foam core that I glued together, and then I put sewing pins through them. So they've got the kind of rounded edge pins on top, and I use that for laying things when they're drying, because it doesn't leave a mark on the project. But I varnished the bottom first because I didn't really do anything to the bottom. So I varnished that first, and then it will rest on that overnight while it dries. Now you want to be careful because varnish is very thin, and with textured elements like the wax seals and some of those three-dimensional stickers, they can catch kind of like the varnish can pool up in the crevices, I should say. So you want to make sure that you wipe away any drips that occur after that. I'm actually going to go put another coat of varnish on it, or at least touch up different varnish areas, just because sometimes you can miss something, or something might not take the varnish very well when you have different surfaces like this. So it's nice if you can give it 2 coats. But yeah, you want to make sure you get in all the nooks and crannies, and then also you go in with like a dry brush and you wipe out any puddles of varnish that you have settling, because those will drip or ooze and just not look that great. But you know, just take your time on this, and then you want to let it dry overnight. Now you really want to make sure you open your box to let it dry, because if you don't, you could seal it shut. One thing that is not a terrible idea is to actually wax the edges of your box, like with a little paraffin wax. Or you could like even put, like, if you have some good wax paper that's really waxed, you could put like a sheet of wax paper in there, you know, until it's, you know, for a month or so, just to keep it. But I'm probably going to wax these because I'm going to be sending this box off, and I want to make sure that it stays in good condition. And plus, it is nice to varnish everything. So yeah, make sure you let it dry open. And I just put a weight on the box so it didn't tip over when it was drying, and there we have it. It's all nice and finished. And I'm going to show you some still shots of this box because I think it turned out really nice. Oh, before we finish though, we have to put our handle back on. So hopefully you haven't lost the pieces for the handle, and hopefully you don't drop the screws 4 times while you're trying to put them back on. But it's par for the course. I recommend a magnetized screwdriver. But yeah, I put the little handle back on. It wasn't difficult. It was just tedious because I kept dropping the stuff. And I'm seeing now as on the replay that I could still see a little difference in the varnish there. So I definitely want to go put another coat on there. But yeah, I mean, you could varnish it again before you put the hardware back on. And I couldn't get all the hardware off, so I mean, that's up to you. I didn't think it was really in the way too badly, but you know, in fact, the struggle I had putting the screws back in there, I don't know if I would take the handles off again. But yeah, and I put a little book plate on the inside, just a little metal embellishment that I had from back in the day, and I wrote the baby's name and weight and birth date on there, and that's how I finished it off. So there you have it. Now I took the box outside so I can get some nice photos in natural light so you can see how it looks. I think that would look so sweet in a baby's nursery, sitting on a shelf or in a corner. Probably up high, because if you have a toddling little baby around, you don't want them getting, whacking on the corners, whacking their head on the corners or anything. But I'm really pleased with how it came out. The client loved it. My friend loved it. And I'm happy with it. I think it turned out all right. I want to thank you so much for watching this project. Is this something you would try? Let me know in the comments below. And let me know what you think about these more out-of-the-box type projects. Thank you so much for watching. And until next time, happy crafting. Bye.